Well, 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 look who's in the news today. Mike Shoesmith here. PP Simmons Radio is the show. And it looks like our old buddy Dan Barker and his group, they're back in the news here. This is a funny one. This will open up a whole can of worms here, I'm telling you. This is in Yahoo News this morning. The leader of an atheist group sued because she didn't believe she qualified for tax exemptions afforded to clergy, when the government says she does qualify as a minister. She got even angrier. "We are not ministers," said Annie Laurie Gaylor, chief of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and she told that to the Tennessean newspaper. "We are having to tell the government the obvious. We are not a church," she says. Oh, there's a familiar name coming up here in a moment. The lawsuit is over the personage exemption for clergy, which allows ministers to claim part of their salary as a tax-free housing allowance. Gaylor's Madison, Wisconsin-based group is organized, united by faith that there is no deity, and essentially builds fellowship around those beliefs. Thus, the Department of Justice filed a brief stating that Gaylor, as the group's leader, is eligible for the exemption since atheist groups can essentially function as a religion. That complicates the foundation's federal lawsuit, first filed in 2009 after the foundation board voted to give Gaylor and her husband Dan Barker, some of you may be familiar with that name, Dan Barker, a housing allowance of $15,000 a year. The couple then claimed they didn't qualify for the same tax exemption as clergy, so the foundation sued the federal government. In August 2012, the federal judge ruled the case can move forward. This is interesting because it essentially puts atheism in the same category that we've been putting it in for decades now. That is that atheism is a religion, right? I mean, they operate based on the faith that there is no God. I mean, that takes a lot of faith, doesn't it? Dan Barker, though, and we're going to watch this as it moves forward because essentially this will put an end to atheism being taught in schools, right? I mean, it should, shouldn't it? And it should essentially put an end to evolution being taught in school, deep time fish to men evolution, because essentially, as Richard Dawkins once said, without evolution teaching, there would be no atheism. He said, "I would not be an atheist were it not for the theory of evolution." Right, so this is a bigger story than people realize, because this could end up we could end up seeing Christian groups going to court and saying, "Hey, look, we have the precedent set here for doing away with all atheistic tenets, and microbe to microbiologist evolution is an atheistic tenet." Of course, and so lawsuits are going to come out of this. I mean, we're going to see like hornets leaving a hornet's nest. We're going to see lawsuits coming out of this like crazy. But listen, Dan Barker, he became famous when he was in a debate a few years ago, and he was asked the question, because Barker says that there is a moral justification for all action. If you no matter how absurd the action. So the person he was debating said, "Look, well, let's say a child let's say an alien group, or rather the question was asked, what moral justification could you give for raping a young girl?" And Barker said, "Okay, let's say the aliens come down from outer space and they say, we're going to kill 7 billion people unless you rape this girl." Barker said that would mean that it would be a moral act to rape a girl. And then the interviewer, the other person said, "Well, what about raping 2 girls?" And Barker says, "Sure, why not?" And then he says, "What about 2,000 girls?" And Barker says, "Well, I don't feel like I'm up to it, but maybe you could. I don't know." And then everybody laughs and making a big joke out of rape. And then Barker was asked, "Well, what about 2 million girls? Would it be morally justified to rape 2 million girls?" And Barker said, "Well, look, if you're saving 7 billion people, raping 2 million girls would be tantamount to sticking a needle into a child's arm to prevent polio," or something to that effect. So he equated raping 2 million little girls with sticking a needle into a child's arm. That's what he equated it with. Well, that is essentially the problem with the modern manifestation of atheism, which is the ancient worldview of the philosophy of naturalism, which says that there is nothing outside of nature, that everything is natural, there is nothing supernatural, and there's so much evidence against that. But that is essentially the modern manifestation of atheism is the philosophy of naturalism. And so at the end of the day, we have people saying that the rape is moral because guess what? When you die, that's it. You rot, right? So it's all about saving the flesh. It's all about saving 7 billion sacks of water in which is contained a soul. There is no they don't accept the fact that the soul moves on, and there is a heaven to embrace and a hell to shun, and there is a God who will judge the if you rape a little girl to save anybody, you'll be judged for that. You'll be judged for that because God is the ultimate judge of humanity. But when you take away the ultimate judge, then, and clearly, as Dan Barker illustrates, anything goes because they will justify it morally somehow. And it all comes down to justifying it morally using the philosophy of naturalism. It's the saving of the flesh. And so anyway, I'll put a link to that article. We have that up on our blog with the video of Dan Barker saying this stuff. But here we go. Atheism now deemed by the government to be a religion. My name is Mike Shoesmith. You've been listening to PP Simmons Radio. We'll talk to you next time.